Greetings, ghouls and ghoulettes. It's your old fiend Cory from the Twin Ports Horror Society. Today we are talking about remakes, reboots, redos, reimaginings, re-this, re-that. However they're packaged and sold to us, we never know if we're going to get something that has been done with love and care towards the original product, or if it's going to be just a quick cash grab. We do know that remakes are going to keep happening forever and ever, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. So I decided to talk to some group members to see which remakes they found enjoyable and which ones they did not. This is part one of our The Great Remake Debacle. Hope you enjoy. All right, now we are here with Ginny Burdue to discuss The Evil Dead and Inside. So let's start with The Evil Dead. This was a remake that you enjoyed, and you had mentioned that you saw the remake before the original.
I did, yes. Yes, yeah. I didn't get into horror until late 2000s, so like 2009, 2010. So I missed out on all like that early 80s stuff and went all back to it. So I saw it before I saw the original.
And so this one, of course, then it made you go back and watch the original, I'm assuming. So how do you like it compared to the original then?
So, okay, I liked of course, the remake. Come on, you have blood raining down everywhere. Arms are getting ripped off. It was so good. And I didn't know that it's like, I heard that it was a remake and I was like, now I have to go watch the original. And I loved the original too. They were both different, but they still kind of, it stayed true to the original while still kind of making it its own, and I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, my camera keeps going out on me here. There we go. The end scene that you mentioned, that's one thing that you have to talk about. I was reading that for the whole movie there was 70,000 gallons of fake blood used, and 50,000 of that was just for that end scene.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, when that happened, I was just like, this movie is amazing. You know, like, it's so good because it's bloody, it's gory, you know, and it does, like, I think it really does give new horror people a chance to go revisit that original classic horror.
Definitely. So, and it's interesting to hear from somebody who saw this one first, because when they announced that they were remaking The Evil Dead, as you can imagine, a lot of people were just like, no, please, you know, don't effing do it.
Yeah.
And it's also surprising too, because it is, I mean, after it came out, it's been generally, you know, well received as far as remakes go. And I think, because like you said, they kept the heart was there, but they didn't try to just redo everything they did.
Yeah, they didn't try to ruin, and they didn't try to do it shot for shot either. They really put their own spin on it. They gave it its own story. I like that they let her survive. You know, they let her walk away, and the original, he didn't, you know, like that ending, he doesn't technically get away. And so I like that they kind of let her have a moment of, I just did all of this and I can escape from it, you know. But I did, both of them were really good, and it made me watch the whole Evil Dead series, you know, and then made me go look it up. There's going to be Evil Dead Rise that's coming out, that's going to be that off of the 2013 one that's coming out sometime this year.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that. So after that remake, the 2013 one came out, Sam Raimi had pitched to the studio that they would do a sequel to that, which was also going to be a sequel to Army of Darkness, and it would have featured Ash and Mia teaming up. But then the studio said, you know, they turned it down. They didn't want to make the movie, which sounds weird to me when Sam Raimi is the one that pitched it. So I'm interested to see because I don't know how many details about that Evil Dead Rise are really out. Not many, as far as I know.
Yeah, not a lot.
I guess I'm interested to see if they, I mean, where exactly they do take that.
Yeah, well, because you can't open it up to both, right? Because that ending of the remake, it had a little bit of Ash in there, so you could definitely tie that story together.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no reason why they shouldn't. I think people would really enjoy that. Um, did you watch the TV series to it all, the Ash versus Evil Dead?
I have not gotten to that yet. It is
That's
in
all
my
right.
watch list. But I haven't gotten to it. You know, it's one of those things that kind of hangs out there that you're like, oh, I should start that, but you have a laundry list of other things to start.
Oh yeah, no, that's really, it's really fun. I'm kind of curious too with the way that the show ended, if that's going to tie into the movie at all, and I won't say anything about it, but that'll just be interested too to see how they tie things together and what things they decide to tie together.
Yep.
So with the going back, did this got you into the Evil Dead series? Did this get you back into any other 80s stuff as well too after watching the Evil Dead? Or
I think, you know, like those late 2000s, once I started, because, you know, there's a lot of the remakes, you know, like House of Wax, all of those that kind of started to come out as remakes that made me go back. And so, like Halloween, I never really watched. When I was little, my mom made me watch like Nightmare on Elm Street and Child's Play. And so I was traumatized for quite a long time. And I think it wasn't until like Blair Witch came out where I was like, oh, okay, I can watch horror again. And then I was probably like early 20s when I kind of fell in love and went back to all the 80s stuff. And I still haven't seen some, but it definitely made me go like Evil Dead, which actually made me go into like Dead Alive and all those other ones, you know, to kind of just go into the classics, you know. So like I said, some I was like, oh, that's already been done. I had no idea. So I think that's the fun thing about remakes, if they're done right, and even if sometimes they aren't done right, it lets people kind of find out about the other things from the past and really get into the genre.
I think that's one thing that the older people kind of forget too. You know, because there are some people who obviously just kind of shun any remake ever, but they don't realize that can open the door to the originals for a whole new group of fans, is what is proven with you. So let's talk about the remake that you disliked. Was called Inside. So I have to admit that I haven't seen these, but from what I understand is that the original was a French film from 2007.
Yes.
And then there was a remake in 2018. Does that sound?
Yeah,
Okay.
2017, 2018, yeah.
So you'll have to tell us about this original movie and then why you disliked the remake, because I do not know. I've not seen them, so I'm gonna have to go watch
Inside?
them. No, I don't believe so. I don't remember seeing it. I kind of was researching it, and I know I haven't seen the French one, but I don't think I saw the American one either.
Yeah. So Inside, or I think, and I will murder the pronunciation for the French versions, like à l'intérieur, you know, type of thing. And it was part of the French extreme horror. So, you know, you had Inside, Martyrs, Frontiers, Livid, that all was kind of part of that French extreme horror. And that original version is brutal. It is very brutal, but it has so many tones to it. Yes, there's a lot of gore, and it's a hard watch. So did you read like kind of what it's about, or do you want me to kind of go over it?
I did a little bit, but you're going to be better at explaining it than I would be, since I haven't actually watched it.
Yeah, long story short, you know, there's a lady and she's pregnant. It's almost Christmas. It's about the day before she's going to give birth, and someone comes into her house and wants to steal that baby. And she's ready with a knife, large kitchen knife, ready to take that baby. And the original French version, like I said, it's not an easy watch. There's parts of it where it actually shows like the baby the reaction to getting hit, and it makes it difficult. A lot of gore, but it's so good. It's so good. And there's not a happy ending. And I think that American remakes, or even sometimes a lot of American movies in general, shy away from that sad ending and have to end on like a happy tone, because that's why the remake didn't work for me. They completely changed the ending and they made it where, oh, the bad person dies, she sacrificed herself and saved the mother, happy ending for all. No. No. It takes away from the point of that original. That original was sad and it was hard to watch, and that's what makes it good. And so it was the remake, it was just not only like, okay, don't get me wrong, you don't always have to have a ton of gore, but if that original is gore, you got to have some gore. And they skipped a lot of that. They skipped a lot of parts, and it didn't have that same impact when I watched the original.
So it just sounds like it was really watered down for the most part.
Very watered down. There's the original, if anybody has seen it, they'll know the part, her coworker gets murdered on the steps, and it's not pretty. And in the remake, he just gets stabbed in the back.
Yeah, that sounds pretty tame compared to what you were saying. So do you think there was anything about the American version then that they did happen to do decent or maybe even improve, or was it just a total suck fest?
I mean, I think it's maybe that thing too of like when you watch them and what order you watch them in, because if you've never seen it, or if you are not familiar with that French horror, it might be okay, right? Like someone could watch it and be like, oh yeah, I mean, it wasn't that bad. It was entertaining. For me, because I knew what it was based on and I've seen that original, I'm like, no, you lost that whole message, where it was very watered down, very tame. The story, it stayed the same and it was similar, but one thing is, so the original, the pregnant woman, she almost resents that baby because in the car accident she loses her husband, and so you watch her go from kind of resenting it to protecting that baby, and watching that story, it's really heartwarming to see that. And in the remake, they didn't have that. So you kind of lose all of those other undertones of the film.
Yeah, from what I read, the brief amount of stuff that I read too, it seems like that the remake was not generally popular at all. So was that something that, had you seen the original before the remake came out? Is it something that you were excited for at all before they did it?
Yeah. I mean, I saw the original first, and then I saw that they were remaking it, and I was like, okay. I'm a little hesitant with us remaking foreign films. So, because again, we like to water it down. Martyrs, they did the same thing. It was very watered down. And so, but I do hold out hope. Like, if you get the right director, you get the right writer who knows that movie and wants to have that same message come across. So I never say, oh, it's always terrible, I'm not going to watch it. I do hold out that hope for it.
Groovy.
All right, we're here with Professor Tom Frichek. Welcome, Tom. And he is here to talk about House of Wax and The House of Wax, a movie that has two remakes, one which he feels strongly about and one which he does not care for. So let's chat about the very original one. Was The Mystery of the Wax Museum, 1933, something like that?
Yep, 33. So it stars Fay Wray the same year she did King Kong. She's the original Scream Queen. She hated that title, but she's dead. What is she going to do to me? But yeah, it stars Fay Wray, stars Lionel Atwill, And Lionel Atwill you'd see in the background of every Universal monster movie. He also had a really good one he did called Dr. X right around this time, which I highly recommend. And it's an early attempt at color in Hollywood. It has a brilliant gay-coded investigative journalist that you never would have seen once the Hays Code took effect. Before we had the rating system, we had a censorship bureau governed by the Hays Code. But since it snuck in before then, we get, her opening line to her boss is, "Hey, how's your sex life?" Highly recommended, very entertaining, very good effects, and some chilling wax museum melting action.
Now, the some of those older movies from the 30s and stuff, I know there's not as many people in the group that are really into that. I mean, just kind of briefly, how did you find yourself, getting into those really old movies? Some people, when you say old, they're like, "Oh yeah, I saw something from the 80s." They're like, "Well, it goes farther than that."
It helps to be a nerd. I'm actually a history teacher. That's my day job when I'm not Professor Frichecking and rating movies. But also it's just kind of where it all started. My mother noticed that I gravitated toward like the donkey transformation scene in Pinocchio. Like I rewound it and watched it over and again. And if you remember Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the Large Marge.
Yes.
One of the scariest that there are R-rated horror movies that can't be that scary. But anyway, so she took me to the library and she rented Frankenstein and The Invisible Man, and her favorite was Creature from the Black Lagoon. And so I just like, oh, I like that one. So I tried out all of those, and then I saw It Came from Outer Space. So it's like, oh, 50s sci-fi. Now I'm watching The Day the Earth Stood Still and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So yeah, the old stuff, man, all the way.
Awesome. All right, so now the Mystery of the Wax Museum, and then I think that the House of Wax from 1953. I had it noted here. Okay, I think that's probably the more popular one, which is the first remake. The Vincent Price one. So, Did you see the one from the 30s first, by any chance?
No, I only saw the one from the 30s for the first time a couple of years ago.
Okay.
I didn't know. I'd always heard of it. I didn't know it was the same plot as the House of Wax. And then I think I saw the the Angry Video Game Nerd was talking about it on an episode of Monster Madness. So I checked it out. Absolutely adore it. Yeah, this 50s version now. If you are a fan of Vincent Price, this is the star-making role of his. This made him the horror leading man. He'd done other horror before, but this was his first iconic piece. And huge success, way bigger than the original, which was a success for its studio. But this one was the 50s version of a blockbuster.
So what makes this first remake successful, in your opinion? Or not successful, what makes it effective to you?
All right. The opening scene, we establish Vincent Price's character. He is obsessed with a heart of gold. He loves his creations. And then something really nasty happens. And we cut to a few years later, and now he's still making wax puppets, but now it is macabre and it's dark, things that he explicitly said he wasn't interested in the first scene. And you see him jaded, and he doesn't like his job, and he doesn't like his co-workers. And then the mystery starts to take hold of, oh, these bodies are disappearing, and oh my gosh, that Joan of Arc looks just like my roommate who died under mysterious circumstances a couple weeks ago. And the original title is Mystery at the Wax Museum. There's no mystery. You know who's doing it. Like, is it not going to be Vincent Price? Come on.
That's great. So, all right. Then of course there's another one. Before we get into that, is the plot, what I'm trying to get here, is there a lot of huge plot differences between the one from the 30s and the one from the 50s? How much did they shake it up between those two?
Well, we lose our amazing gay-coded investigative reporter. She is completely written out of the movie. And the romantic lead, who was played by Fay Wray in the original, she does a little bit of snooping around, but mostly the investigative reporting element is just taken out. But otherwise, some scenes, the dialogue is exactly the same. It does follow, it has the exact same twist ending. Again, who could the murderer be? But yeah, it's very faithful. It's just a little more exciting, and the Vincent Price's character portrayal it's one of the best horror performances of all time.
All right, so now let's fast forward to 2005. We get another House of Wax remake. So this one was actually fairly successful at the time as far as these types of horror movies go. I remember seeing it in the theater, and that there was a decent, buzz from my memory. I think one of the big things that they did with the marketing, was that you get to see Paris Hilton get killed. And so there was all those "See Paris Die" ads, that kind of led up to that. So, and they changed a lot. I've seen the one from the 50s. That's a favorite of mine. And then, I've seen this more recent one quite a few times as well too. So there's a lot of differences there. So why doesn't the 2005 movie rate high on the Frichek scale for you?
It didn't do too well on the old Frichek scale. So I have to say, I watched these three movies over the course of 2 nights, and I had friends with me, and we agreed that the first two, Mystery of the Wax Museum and House of Wax, they made a great double feature, because not only do you see how sensibilities got a little bit more modern, but also you see, what censors were doing at the time. Now, the 2005 version, if I had to describe it in one word, I would call it joyless. It is a joyless slog of needing to get from one scene to the other, not using the motivations of the characters, but just because we have to get to the next scene somehow. Paris Hilton's character and her boyfriend are obviously written in at the last minute. They affect the plot in no way. They use any excuse to separate them from the other characters, which they are for about 80% of the movie. And the characters themselves are, there's no one really to root for, which was the case in so many of those mid-2000s slasher movies like Valentine's Day, like in the third wave of Scream ripoffs, let's say. Not that being a Scream ripoff is a bad thing, or being, if you've only got characters for me to want to see get killed, that's fine too. The remake of Friday the 13th, I'm a much bigger fan than most folks of that one. And those are mostly characters that you just kind of want to see die. But when Chewie dies, it's hilarious because Chewie's so funny. Like, these characters are bland, generic. The siblings have a weird sexual tension that I really wasn't digging. And then I didn't turn it off for 2 reasons. One, I had friends over. But 2 was, every once in a while we got a little bit of really good gore. Did you notice that one? There's 3 or 4 times in there where you really do get some gore that's a little bit more brutal than you would expect. So I had to keep watching for that reason. And sure enough, there's one scene, let's say with someone is sitting at a piano, and I don't want to give too much away. And they're sitting very still at a piano. And that is a brilliant piece of gore. It's very tense. It's very like, oh, look away. But other than that, like I said, there's very little joy to be had, especially after watching Vincent Price, who nobody has more fun being evil than Vincent Price. To be traded for Tommy Wiseau if he was in Slipknot, I guess is how I would describe the big scary guy in this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that guy was or whatever. Well, what did you think about the effects in the final scene with the big meltdown of the building?
It was better than a lot of movies back then. Their third act was a special effects catastrophe. I'm thinking House on Haunted Hill. Good movie, good build up. Then it's an evil cartoon cloud that chases you, and it's got Chris Kattan's face on it. So they did do that at the time. They did these big third act set pieces that was all digital and it looked like crap. This is Scorpion King, you know? So this was maybe the best version of that because it was epic. It's a house made of wax, and they got the characters to run up the steps in a house made of wax that was on fire. Like, objectively, that's entertaining, but not enough to save it. But what did you think of that last, the great melting?
I like that. That's I mean, you have to go through the rest of the movie to get to that. So if you're not into the rest of the movie, maybe it's not worth it. To be honest with you, I don't know that I dislike that movie. You know, like I've watched it a couple times, and I mean, I enjoy it enough. I don't have like huge praise for it. But I guess as far as remakes rank, you know, it's definitely not. It's more of a mid-tier thing just because at least they did attempt to do something different. I almost think if they would have tried to copy the other one too much, it definitely wouldn't have worked in 2005.
I completely agree. And in fact, I should have given it credit. The screenplay it's completely original. The homages to the original are pretty basic, and they did steal the scariest stuff from the original story. So points for that. Points for making a new movie.
I can see what you mean about it being joyless, though. I mean, like, I don't care about the characters either when I watch it, or, you know, I'm not like invested in the even the bad guy. I'm just like you said, you're just like, it's fine, or it's okay. It's not the best or the worst for me,
but then you get the finger snipping scene, and you're like,
yeah,
I'm gonna stick around. You know, I'll keep watching this one. Yeah, if you're gonna go joyless, I don't know, what was it about that Friday the 13th remake that just like I enjoyed those characters that I didn't like, and I really did want to see them die, as opposed to like in House of Wax, it's like, okay, the guy with the red hat hasn't been given a character yet, so he's gonna die first. And then he dies first.
yeah.
So yeah, I liked when you asked me about this. I thought, well, House of Wax is perfect for this, because I would say that the first remake, the 50s one, is better than the original. So usually we only say that thing about things like The Thing or The Blob, or, you know, but I'd say this one, the Vincent Price, it's iconic, and the original isn't. So then to see it kind of take the turn of like what would a House of Wax with a new metal soundtrack sound like? And I think
Right.
now we know.
All right. I am joined by Ryan Hamilton, and we are going to discuss Suspiria and Black Christmas. So Suspiria is the remake you chose to talk about that you liked. So do you want to talk about the original one from 1977 a bit first, and what you think about that one quick before we get to the remake?
Sure, yeah. So for a few years, the original Suspiria was one of my favorite horror movies. I just loved the Technicolor and overall production design of the original. Um, in hindsight, it probably doesn't entirely make 100% sense, but it's just a wild adventure for me. I really enjoy the aesthetics of the 70s, so I thought using Dario Argento's filmmaking techniques, as well as just the weirdness of it all, like the bad English dubbing, since everyone's from different nationalities. It's just this weird experience that at the end of the day, I just was really intrigued by. Um, so yeah, I still consider it one of my favorite horror movies of all time.
So with Suspiria too, the original, would you kind of agree that the movie, it's not so much about the plot as it is more about the look and the feel with that movie?
Yeah, it feels like it's not trying to be a thorough story as far as plot goes, but it's more about the visual and audio experience of it all together. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, and I think most people think that works in that situation. I don't know. I don't know that other movies pulled that off if they weren't worried about the plot so much, but I think that's a good example of one that was more about the feel and just the look and everything like that. So, all right, let's go to the 2018 version of Suspiria then. So, being a fan of the original, I mean, what did you think when you heard they were first going to remake this? What were your hopes?
I was a little worried since with like the 2000s, we got so many remakes that were just like replicating a lot of the same beats from their original counterparts. So I was sort of worried, but I went into it with an open mind. The trailers looked really good. But it was nice that once I went into it, it wasn't just like so many of like the Friday the 13th remake, or a little bit of Rob Zombie's remake of Halloween, and just so many different examples. It was nice that they changed it up a bit while still keeping somewhat of the same premise as the original.
What were some of the changes that worked as far as the plot then that you think?
Well, it was nice to, instead of having Dakota Johnson's version of Susie, the protagonist, instead of having her fight the witches, she's joining the coven instead of just eliminating everybody. So that was like a nice change of pace, but also they're incorporating the actual dance at the dance school into part of like the horror of the plot, instead of just having it be like a circumstance in the background. So that was a nice, refreshing change of pace. Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but
Oh, that's all right. So, do you think that newer one was a bit more plot focused compared to the original then?
a little bit. It seemed like there were still parts that were confusing, but at the same time, since Dario Argento's was so stylistic, it felt like they needed to do something different with the plot, or focus more on the story instead of have it be kind of straight to the point like Dario Argento's. I felt like they kind of made it more intricate with incorporating like the actual Mother Superior and all the other mother figures, like Dario Argento would go on to expand in the rest of his original trilogy. Yeah, it seems more of an elaborate work, and they thought more about the world they were creating, bigger picture, than maybe Dario Argento was in the 70s.
How would you compare the looks of the new one then? Do you think they tried to go for the same style in a lot of spots, or do you think it was different enough?
Yeah, it seemed like they wanted, because I believe the original Suspiria was shot in Technicolor, and it was one of the last movies shot that way. So going from this bright vibrancy of film and trying to do something different where everything's just bleak and depressing in tone, and overall the production design of this one seems more like gothic and more subdued in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, more subtle than just big vibrant colors and loud um, music everywhere.
Right, but hey, it seemed to work. I think that remake does seem to get quite a bit of praise as far as remakes go. So it seemed like it worked. That one worked for a lot of people. Which and that's probably a tougher movie to tackle before it was done. You know, if you're throwing out names of movies, that might be one where somebody would say like, don't bother with that. So it's interesting to see it get that it worked out and that it does get quite a bit of praise. So Black Christmas, so the original 1974, that's kind of considered one of the first bigger slasher movies to a lot of people. With you got Filthy Billy making his nasty phone calls, very effective film. I don't think anyone's going to argue that that's a classic. So then it was remade in 2006 and 2019. So you said the 2019 one is the one that you very much disliked. So let's talk about that. Why did that not work for you?
It was very heavy-handed with a lot of its messaging, which I'm not saying I disagree with the messaging, but the way it was handled was just very like preachy, and just going into research of the production itself, it sounded like it was very rushed. So I can't like blame them for it not being to a 10, but everything just, it didn't totally come together. I appreciate its intentions, but the overall viewing experience just was not the most satisfying as a viewer, in my opinion.
So I got to be honest. I didn't even watch that one. Because it did seem kind of rushed. Because all of a sudden it was just kind of out. I don't even really remember hearing much about it beforehand, like being in production or anything. It just seemed like it just came out of nowhere. And then I didn't really hear anything good about. I don't know that I know anybody who enjoyed it. So I don't even know really what they changed so much. If you don't mind mentioning a couple of the changes or anything that you think like that just didn't work.
Yeah, a lot of the changes, well, there's supernatural elements involved now.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's, yeah, I don't know if anyone was really a fan of that, but from what so they are trying to explore the feminist themes like in the original, but in the original where they're focusing more on like abortion rights, since like Roe versus Wade happened roughly around that time.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to touch on feminist themes like that, but they kind of approached it in a over the top social justice warrior way. So there, a lot of the characters are very one dimensional. There is, and like the actors themselves are trying to give something to them so they feel like real people, but based on the writing, it just, they all feel like generic college boys or college girls. Not a whole lot of stuff going on there. And there's like a fictional bust of some of like the university founder, and it drips like black ooziness, and that's feeding into like toxic masculinity in the frat houses and just stuff like that. It's really stupid.
Yeah, it sounds a lot different. Is Filthy Billy even in that? Is there any prank phone calls or what did they?
They did like one homage. They're like, there's a brief scene in the beginning where the girls are looking at Christmas trees, and one of them gets a phone call after getting some creepy text messages, but the phone call ends up being like it's just some glitchy sounds, and then it's like, oh, I'm looking for my daughter who's one of your sorority sisters. Have you seen her? So they do like a brief glitch where it sounds like he's talking to her, but it's nothing huge. Otherwise, they have like homages left and right where someone's like their body's left on the roof of the building, so it's kind of like the girl in the window with the bag over her mouth.
Yeah.
Or somebody gets killed with a glass unicorn, but it's one of the frat boys. There's also like a clan of frat boys that are the killers, and they're led by Carrie Ellis, who's one of the professors on campus who's kind of a misogynist. So it's, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see. So do you think if they would have just slapped a different title on that, could the movie have worked a little better, or would it sounds like maybe not even then?
I mean, it would definitely get compared less to the original Black Christmas and even the original remake, but I don't think it would still be that well received, just probably just a little better. Yeah.
So the 2006 remake then, it sounds like if people didn't like that one, they're definitely gonna appreciate that one a lot more compared to this new one.
Yeah, I used to look at that as like a really trashy remake. I still have fun with it. The gore is fun. It's weird to explore Billy's backstory a little bit more, but I don't know. That's more fun to me now to watch now that I've seen this new remake. You know.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know too. Bob Clark, the director from that original one, he went on to make a Christmas Story. Well, Porky's before that, which was a pretty popular film. But it's kind of funny that he got his start with Black Christmas being one of his first more well-known movies, and then went on to make freaking Christmas Story, which is on TV for a whole 24 hours during the season. So it's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, I could see the parallels though. You see some minor horrific moments in A Christmas Story, so I can see his little flavor creeping in there.
Definitely. Well, any last thoughts on any of those Black Christmas movies there?
You'll probably have more fun with the 2006 version if you haven't seen it yet, but I don't know. Watch them for yourselves, form your own opinion.
You fucking creep!
I'm going to kill you.
All right, now we're joined by Myles Nelson. He's here to talk about two films that they share a common thread in director Tobe Hooper with the originals anyway. So we're going to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then Poltergeist remakes after that. So let's, of course, start with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This was a remake that you said that you enjoyed. So let's, did you see the original before the remake?
I want to say bits and pieces of the original, not the one that was all like musical or whatever, you know what I mean? You know with Dennis Hopper or whatever, you know that one I'm talking about?
Oh, okay, yeah, that was the second one.
Okay, so the original one. I did see the original one. And I saw bits and pieces of that one first, and then I saw the remake with Jessica Alba.
Jessica Biel.
Jessica Biel.
That's all right.
Jessica Biel.
Okay, so you saw that. Then did that prompt you to ever go back and watch the original fully then?
See, I was going to, and then I didn't because then I saw bits and pieces of number 2, and that weirded me out, and not in a good way. But the first one, I saw most of it, I'd say. It's so dark, and it really grossed me out. Irked me.
That sounds like a fair effect. The original happens to be one of my favorite movies. I also am a fan of the remake as well too. But why don't you tell us why the remake worked for you? Why you think that was a good movie?
So I like the remake because it shows like the actual footage in the beginning. It says it's based off a true story, but it's like this much true story, and then how much like they fabricated it. So it's like that actual footage kind of like putting you in a whole new mindset. It's like, wait a minute, what, real footage? Or it's black and white and it's grainy, and that's how they kind of started it off. And I'm like, oh, that's what? Like, okay. And I was like, hey, Jessica Biel's in this. That's pretty cool. But I think that remake was definitely gritty because they had what's Arlie Ermy, and he, he's from Full Metal Jacket, and then he was in Saving Silverman, so you kind of see him like that, and then now you see him as this scary badass compared to like the drill sergeant puts you down emotionally. He's putting you down physically, and the dude is just so good at getting you in that, like, he's like, oh, he knows something that you don't, and he has that badass attitude, and he's a creepy badass, which is, because they said Saving Silverman and Full Metal Jacket. So I like that seeing him in that character, a creepy, irky character. I thought that was cool. And in the original, the one scene that still creeps me out is when he's running up that ramp, right when Leatherface is right there, and he like hits him over the head, and then he hits him over the head again, and his body starts twitching. Oh, that was such a effect. And that scene would remind, like, that irkiness of the remake is when Arlie Ermy hits the dude in the face with a bottle and his teeth go out. Those similarities were just like so irky and cringy and just not, well, like, that was really hard to watch, like, in a good way, because it's like, it really, you can feel it everywhere, that you're like, oh man, this is pretty messed up.
One big difference with the original is they never really show any extreme violence for the most part. They really kind of trick you into thinking that you've seen it. Like in the original, when he puts the girl on the meat hook, they don't actually show it going into her.
Right.
And I think, but one thing I think that, works with this remake though is that I think they use the violence sparingly enough, like that scene that you were talking about, instead of just going nuts with it and having it be like a complete bloodshed of a movie. So I think that kind of helped with the atmosphere as well. One thing about that movie, I think a lot of people forget, is that it was produced by Michael Bay.
What?
Yes, and I think, and I was also going to mention, I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten that by now. But I think when it was announced and it was coming out, and fans of the original, they're just like, what? Hold on, Michael Bay is making a chainsaw, involved in a chainsaw movie, and we're just like, okay, this is going to be awful. But I think it's pretty generally well received as far as remakes go.
Oh yeah, for sure. I had no idea that was a Michael Bay thing. Like how he does all that action and explosions, and definitely theater catching, going for the box office smash hits, and then doing something real gritty, like it shows them wearing the friend's face, so the last thing they see is their friend. Like, oh, okay, Michael Bay, okay.
And it's one of those things too. I don't know how much of that movie he should get credit for as far as, you know, visually or anything. But like I said, his name is on there as a producer, you know, was the big name. So that's interesting too.
Yeah. Huh.
The other scene that was kind of a big deal too is this was the first chainsaw movie, because there was 4, you know, from the original run before this. The first one where you see Leatherface's face behind the mask. So that was kind of a big thing too, because that wasn't tackled before. Let's see here. Let's move on to Poltergeist. So that was a remake that you did not enjoy. Now, I have to ask then, were you a fan of the original Poltergeist?
It's one of my favorite scary movies ever.
Okay.
One of, I would say, top 2 or so favorite scary movies ever. I don't know what it was. And I saw the sequel for that one, for that matter, for what it's worth. And it was just, yeah, really, really loved the first one. So I thought they had some pretty big shoes to fill for a remake.
Yeah, I mean, the originals, it's an effective film. I mean, there's a reason why it's really popular. That one was also directed by Tobe Hooper. But of course, you know, Steven Spielberg gets most of the credit for writing it and et cetera, et cetera. So did you see that when you were really young then?
Yeah, I saw Poltergeist when I was real young, and I saw the TV version first, and then later I saw like the made original version and not the TV version. But the original one was so creepy constantly, because it was something so out of their control. You know, it's like they're good people and it wasn't brought upon them, and it's just like, this is their living space, this is their living quarters, it's attacking their entire family and they have no idea why, and all the creepy stuff, and oh man. And
you feel oh, sorry. If you feel like, oh, this family did nothing wrong, look what's happening to them, this could happen to me and my family.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything was going good, everything was on the upward, and they're all like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. And then they're like, oh, things are slightly off. And then they get bad real quick. For what they see as no reason.
Yeah, because I mean, they didn't know what was going on.
Right.
You know, they didn't do that. So, all right, why was the remake no good for you?
I'm gonna so the main character, Sam Rockwell, is kind of known to be the bad guy in most movies. He's not really known to be a protagonist, you know? Like, I just like to dislike him. And I was like, it's hard to feel bad for him, because I didn't really like him as a good guy. Because I've seen him before in his bad roles, like in The Green Mile. He was the hard one to, you can't like him, and he's just like, oh, I hate that guy. And then he's a bad guy in Iron Man, but in the way I've seen things, but I'm just like, it's hard to like him for that. And the clown, the kid's clown doll, in the original, they made it look like that's a child's toy. That's it, you know, clowns were different. Either way, clowns are creepy. But then it was like, oh, that's a kid's toy. And in the remake, they like purposely made him creepy and be like, oh yeah, that's a kid's toy for sure. Like, that's no kid's toy. Like,
it's all
that
demonic and shit.
That doll is demonic from the start. Like, no. So, and like, since I saw the original and I know the remake, I was like, well, I know what's gonna happen to that clown. Like, but even if you didn't see the remake, or even if you didn't see the original, I think you would still know that clown is up to no good from the start. So I was like, dead giveaway. That's about it. Otherwise, they did have some really good high creepy points compared to the original. Like, am I just going on about how much I don't like the remake or why I like
No,
both?
if you can say, if you have anything nice to say about it, you can say that as well too.
They definitely had cool creepy points, which like you were saying earlier about how some of them left to your imagination, but then some of them did. Like in the original, she puts her hands on the TV, and then in the remake, it shows her do it, and she looks away. And you can see the hand trying to reach her from the other side. In the original, you're kind of thinking, what's going on that TV? And then when you have the remake, you're like, oh, it's in your face. Oh, that's creepy. Now they're right there. They're that close to her, and you now can visually see how close they really are to her, and her being as innocent as ever, not knowing they're coming for her. Like, because you'd hear, they would talk nice to her, and they would, oh, is grandma there? And then he snatched her. But yeah, it was just something about that was cool that they did, was they didn't leave it to your imagination, but it was a very cool visual of how close they were actually to this sweet, innocent little girl. I thought it was a pretty fun scene in the original when they're putting on they're on the floor and they're sliding across, and she's like, that's fun. And in the remake, they put their hand on the door, and then their hair goes all staticky. So it's like, that's fun. It's because that's how it started. It was all fun and different and weird and innocent, but like fun, interesting, weird, and then it just again went downhill real quick, and was just creepy. And I didn't like the remakes too much. Computer animation, and like the original, they had the mom like dangle from a room, but she was actually hung up by wires that were CGI'd, so it looked really awkward compared to other parts where it's like, oh, that's all computer animated, or like how they used the clown doll was a puppet, but then when it moved in the remake, it was computer animated. And that was something. I mean, I'm sure if you saw it for the very first time, you'd be and you're in that age group of young, and it was, rated R, and you were 17 years old, and that was your first scary movie. I think it would be a lot different compared to when I see the old school, I guess the old school puppetry or the claymation compared to the over the top special effects.
Oh yeah, definitely. Another thing too, in comparing this and the chainsaw one, I think with the Poltergeist one, they really tried to stick with the flow of the original a lot more than the chainsaw movie. And I don't know that really helped them. I don't know, because it was just kind of redoing almost the same movie with a computer, and a shittier cast. Because I do agree with you too about the choice of the lead and most of the cast, because you just don't. Same thing as I felt too. Is I'm like, I just don't really care about any of these people like in the original one,
And that was another driving point, because I saw Coach on TV.
Oh, yeah.
Because Coach was easier to access for me. So you see Coach, this happy-go-lucky guy, always great. He doesn't have all that. He's never angry. He's never mad. He's just concerned. And Craig T. Nelson. And so I saw that, and I was like, that's Coach. That's Coach. And then I see him yelling and screaming and fearful and crying and has all these emotions. I was like, whoa, Craig T. Nelson. Like, I feel genuinely bad for this family because it's Craig T. Nelson's crying. And I know him as Coach, and I see him angry when you forgot you didn't move the bodies. You only moved the headstones. Seeing him angry and mad was awesome. And that was super cool. And it's like, I was like, oh man, I couldn't imagine ever seeing my dad angry or sad or crying. So that was again definitely mixed with my emotions a lot. more compared to Sam Rockwell. Because so I think that was pretty cool. And of course, Coach came out in '89, and then Poltergeist came out in '82. So just the way, maybe it'd be different if I saw Sam Rockwell in this Poltergeist and then saw him as a bad guy. Like I saw Craig G. Nelson as Coach, and I liked Coach, and then seen him, after and saw Poltergeist or before I saw Poltergeist. So I thought maybe that whole thing has a good play on it of the emotional thing as well, not just the visual, but also like the very emotional thing about it.
Definitely.
Maybe that's why.
So when this Poltergeist remake came out, were you excited at all, or what did you think? Did you think it could have been good?
I had really high hopes. Cause like, my favorite horror movie. I was like, they have to do a good job. They have to do a good job. I hope so. And I went in and I was pretty bummed, but I also can see why they didn't make sequels like the first one. Even they made sequels after the first Poltergeist, and they had 2 of their cast members perish, and they still couldn't do that with the remake. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
even the remake, maybe critics and everybody funding it were like, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Maybe we didn't do as well as we thought we could, and maybe we should have went a different direction. But I definitely went in there like loving the original. And I was gonna go in watching the remake, definitely open-minded, but definitely had high hopes. And I was like, I wonder how they're gonna do this. I wonder how. Another thing that made the original was that little old lady to
Yeah.
her voice alone was something eerie about it. And then they had Jared Harris, the guy they had him. They would play that medium, and there was something about him I didn't like either. I mean, the lady, she was creepy. Tangina Barons was the medium, I believe, something along those lines. And she was just creepy alone, but like not trying to be creepy. Just something about her, and she's like, seems like a sweet little lady, but yeah.
Yeah, I think her performance definitely sticks out from that movie. I think to anybody who watches it.
Mhm.
And then I watched the remake once, but like I don't remember it. There's nothing that really sticks out to me like about it that like that, or just at all. So I'm definitely in the same boat with you in regards to this remake. And I think, in general, it's not. I don't think it ever was very well received, among critics or fans. I think it's still just kind of. It's one that's not going to make any top remake lists for anybody for the most part.
That's a fair statement, I'd say.